So before we start, I do have a second channel. So if you are interested in more content that isn't related to anime and manga, consider going over there and subscribing. Also, if you end up enjoying this video, consider leaving a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. So to be entirely honest, I absolutely adore when Weekly Shonen Jump releases brand new manga. Obviously it comes with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknown, that the potential or the percentage of this series getting axed or cancelled is extremely high. And if I fall in love with them or if I heavily enjoy them, my disappointment in them getting axed or cancelled is going to be immense. So I guess it's pretty easy to say that it's difficult to kind of feel comfortable reading a Weekly Shonen Jump story, but for some reason I always find myself excited to see what potential new author releasing their brand new work that they're very excited about and just to read some new material. This author, however, with this brand new series is by no means new. They're coming off a rather successful series within Jump Plus, and they've worked with some of the most recognized individuals within the industry today that have gained so much popularity and fame and respect over the previous year or two. This series is called Ayashimon, and the author is none other than Yuji Kaku, the person that created Hell's Paradise. If you don't know anything about Yuji Kaku, don't worry. I'm going to go through some of their catalog of work, who they've worked with, and basically what to expect from Ayashimon if you haven't read Hell's Paradise, because there is a lot of influence pulled from that series. There's a lot of stylistic choices and just the atmosphere itself is very similar to Hell's Paradise, but it also pulls from some of the previous works that they've done. Not in terms of their own stories, but the assistant work that they have done. And once again, this leads us all the way back to Fujimoto and Fire Punch, as Yuji Kaku was an assistant and worked heavily on Fire Punch with Fujimoto. So hopefully that sparked your interest, but with that being said, let's begin.
Meet Sucky Sucky now, mommy.
Starting off, I want to talk a little bit about Yuji Kaku as an author specifically. They haven't done all too much work. You might actually know one of them by name. It's a series that I feel like a lot of people have glossed over the name but never actually read it, probably because of its length, and it's a series known as Phantasma. I remember seeing it constantly many years ago, but I never read it. This was one of their earliest works, which I believe only had about 10 to 15 chapters. From there they've done a one-shot, and then basically they went with Hell's Paradise. But before they started working on Hell's Paradise, which is critically acclaimed and very successful within Jump Plus, they were working with Fujimoto on Fire Punch, and Fire Punch kind of brought the name of Fujimoto into the public sphere and made him very recognizable. Fire Punch is very unique. It's got a very interesting aesthetic and perspective, and it's identifiable to be Fujimoto's work. It's definitely rough and a little bit all over the place, but there's beauty within it. Obviously, Fujimoto would then go to polish his own work and create Chainsaw Man, and Yuji Kaku would go on to create Hell's Paradise. So yes, Yuji Kaku was an assistant to Fujimoto, just like the author of Dandadan, and just like the author of Spy X Family. Do you see something in common with Jump Plus? The editor in that department, someone that has kind of watched over Fujimoto's success, has kind of helped cultivate not only Fujimoto's success, but all of his assistants to spin them off and to create their own successful series, not only influenced by Fujimoto's aesthetic and his style of writing, but also their own uniqueness, charm, and quirk. I believe the editor's name is Shihei Lin. Probably completely butchered that name, I apologize, but they have done the most to make everyone recognizable within their own realm, within their own strengths, within Jump Plus. Hell's Paradise was the first with Yuji Kaku, and it was very successful. Unfortunately, it just missed the kind of Chainsaw Man, Kaizen, and Demon Slayer hype. It was right before it and kind of bled into it. So when Demon Slayer got super successful, and then Jujutsu Kaisen, and then Chainsaw Man, and everything in between, Hell's Paradise was kind of missed out because it missed this new level of hype and expectation for storytelling within manga. I would argue that if Hell's Paradise was a little bit after Demon Slayer's success, very similar in parallel to Chainsaw Man, it would have been a lot more popular and a lot more recognized. But that doesn't mean it was a failure. It was very enjoyable, it was very well received, and it's currently getting an anime. Not too sure when that's coming out, but I am hoping the best for it. After Hell's Paradise, Yuji Kaku went silent and obviously started working on this brand new series, Ayashimon, which is now jumping over to Weekly Shonen Jump. If you haven't read Hell's Paradise, I highly recommend you do, because there is a lot of similarities, a lot of concepts, specifically the atmosphere is kind of pulled straight from Hell's Paradise. It's one of the most prominent and powerful things that Yuji Kaku is capable of producing. Obviously, they can create a very compelling, story-driven experience, but some of the most powerful moments is cultivating this suffocating atmosphere that is filled with so much intensity and emotion and skewering your perspective on specific events. In Hell's Paradise, it is extremely impressive, and I expect it's going to be refined and even better within Ayashimon. Obviously within limitations to what Weekly Shonen Jump is actually allowing, but for the most part, it seems pretty free, it seems pretty liberating, and after the recent success of Kaizen and more specifically Chainsaw Man, the, I guess, framework of Weekly Shonen Jump's formula and what they allow in terms of absurdity has kind of opened up a little bit more. There's a little bit more flexibility and freedom within there, and I hope Ayashimon plays into that part. Coming from Hell's Paradise, there is a lot of crazy, unique things that Yuji Kaku can bring to the table, and I'm hoping that they actually do. I also want this series to hopefully prove a percentage of people wrong. Whenever a new series gets released within Weekly Shonen Jump, there is obviously that uncertainty. There is the unknown that comes with it, and the potential of it actually getting cancelled. It's hard to put your faith in new series, because if they do get cancelled, you feel kind of broken, you feel disrespected, you feel annoyed. And I know you can think of at least one or two series where they have been cancelled, but they had so much potential within them. They don't have to be the most unique thing ever or the most perfect thing ever, but you knew, you had such a strong feeling that they would survive it, and unfortunately they didn't. It's hard for me to put faith in this new series just because it's Weekly Shonen Jump, and not because of Yuji Kaku, but because of how strict and how much success they want right off the bat. But luckily enough, I can say that Ayashimon has been trending within Japan and is extremely well received already, because not only has Fujimoto recently just blown up in popularity, and obviously Yuji Kaku was an assistant to Fujimoto alongside the Dandadan author and the Spy X Family author. All of these very prominent people now are coming out and promoting Ayashimon to the audience, to the public, which is hyping everyone up more and getting more excitement and engagement behind it, and it's elevating it pretty far. The first chapter isn't anything groundbreaking or revolutionary, but it is solid in its approach. It's very understandable. It has this charm and quirk that I feel like a lot of people are going to latch onto if you enjoy Chainsaw Man, while still bringing its own uniqueness from Hell's Paradise. However, it does touch on topics that are already pretty frequent. The battle manga, yokai, demon, curses, very Japanese lore-heavy topics. I can fully understand why people may not enjoy this, because we already have Kaizen, because we already had Demon Slayer, because we already have this series or that series that is using curses or demons or yokais or some sort of Japanese lore like Dandadan, for example, even though that's specifically Jump Plus, or Chainsaw Man, even though that's moving to Jump Plus with part 2. I get it. I understand a lot of people may be sick and tired of going down this route, but this is something that Weekly Shonen Jump kind of push for. They will try to replicate and take different facets from pre-existing successful series and reintroduce them into newer manga. If demons and yokais and cursed energy and spirits are successful, then by all means they're going to replicate it until it isn't. And yes, it does come repetitive and boring, but I can promise you that Yuji Kaku, when it comes to lore, when it comes to understanding the specifics, even culture, even religion, and the portrayal of it, the uniqueness of it, they are one of the best within the industry. Hell's Paradise is such a unique interpretation of cultural influences blending with religion influences and mashing them together in this very demonic, destructive, but also beautiful type of way. It's almost surreal. It's like seeing all of these worlds and ideas and concepts collide to create this brand new thing. And it's, I guess, ethereal in a sense, very godly, but in a way where it feels somewhat demonic. It's a super weird thing to explain, but if you've ever read Hell's Paradise, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm hoping that authenticity, that uniqueness, that detail that Yuji Kaku has in expressing these things and combining everything together fleshes and shows itself within Ayashimon, which I believe it 100% will. I seen that style, I seen that uniqueness in the color page with all of the yokai coming out to play. You have Yakuza and the laws and the specifics of it with very interesting yokai and the designs or the backings or the lore for that, and you are aiming for a very enjoyable experience. If you haven't already noticed, I do have high hopes, and I really wish the best for Yuji Kaku to get that series that blows up in popularity similar to Chainsaw Man or similar to Dandadan, but this time within the main stage, within the main spotlight, within Weekly Shonen Jump. But what is Ayashimon? What is this story about? Well, let's take a look. I was surprised with the first chapter because it reminded me heavily of Chainsaw Man, almost one-to-one, but it almost had this filter or overlay of Fire Punch specifically, where things would be cut short or jumped around or kind of thrown all over the place really quickly. It's kind of reading through like these segmented pieces that are all stitched together to give you the clearest, quickest, and precise understanding of the main character in pretty much every single facet. Literally within 10 pages, you can kind of get an understanding of what the main character is like. And this is out of a 50 to almost 60 page chapter. This is very purposeful, it's very specific, but it does come at a very weird cost where you can't really see the intimate future of the main character, how far they progress from here, or different kind of segmented avenues that they could go down, because everything's kind of skipped or cut short or jumped over very quickly. So I think for the product of entertainment, to reel people into the story, to create something engaging and a little bit thought-provoking but also really enjoyable as an experience, Ayashimon's first chapter does a great job, and Yuji Kaku knocked it out of the park. Because I am interested in the main character, it does make me curious because there's things chucked in there that you wouldn't actually expect. So our main character, Marao or Maru, I'm not too sure how to pronounce the name, is like this young teenage boy who is extremely powerful, normal human, at least from what we know, and they are obsessed with fighting. He has been training his entire life, he's been fighting, and he's been really bored with fighting. No one is strong enough to even compete, so he's looking for all of these jobs because he needs to make money, he needs to earn a living, and no place will hire him because he's quite genuinely too strong. So he goes through all of these different job opportunities and none of them work. They all kind of throw him out or tell him to go elsewhere. He's just too obnoxiously powerful, and they kind of deem him as being a monster. This is something that Yuji Kaku does really well with their characters, is that you would think that none of this would actually hurt the main character, at least within a lot of other stories, and even within the first chapter you probably wouldn't care less for it, but knowing how this worked within Hell's Paradise, this is something that eats away at the main character very often. It's something that is enclosed within like a singular bottle, and it builds up over time with this person never talking about it until it eventually breaks or cracks. And this is exactly what happens with our main character. All of this verbal abuse, calling him a monster, saying that he's not human, and this actually has an effect. And I can almost guarantee this will have an effect later on within the story. But obviously where it takes place is going to be entirely different. It's not going to be within the human world per se. What's interesting about this is that the reason behind our main character being as powerful as he is and why he's training and constantly looking to fight people is for two things. One, he admires manga protagonists. I think it's a nice little quirky thing just to grab some sort of relevancy for manga readers and Weekly Shonen Jump readers in themselves, and I don't think it's going to be a consistent thing. I don't think he's always going to mimic attacks from other series and then reform it in his own ways, which is something that he does within the first chapter. I think it's just a nice way to pay homage to a lot of these series and to give you a bit of an understanding, or a comedic understanding if that, for the main character's approach. But the more tragic and realistic version of it is that he trained so desperately day in and day out because his father was abusive, and that his end goal, his final goal, was to beat his father. I am surprised this is actually in here. It's very small, it's very simple, they don't play on it all too much, but it goes to build this very understandable backstory for his character. He didn't just train or become strong for the sake of liking all of these manga characters or wanting to be a manga protagonist himself, but he more so bled that into the idea that he wanted to beat his father because his father was extremely abusive. At the moment, it's probably disingenuous to say that this has actually had a very drastic effect on our main character mentally. So I don't really want to go down that route, but if you are interested in kind of hearing that version of it, because Chainsaw Man has done something extremely similar but hasn't actually played on it either. I've done a handful of videos on talking about why Denji is the way he is in terms of being childish and stunted and very simplistic in a sense, where you can make fun of him because of how goofy he is, but it's actually like that for a very sad reason from his childhood. I can only hope at the moment that we go down this route for our main character. The way he's very over the top in that sense could stem from these moments within his childhood, but to talk about them now in such detail just based off one chapter, a little bit disingenuous, so I'll save it for later on. From here, our main character gets into a little bit of an altercation because he sees this young woman getting chased by these Yakuza looking people. They get into a massive fight, he obliterates them with ease, and then it turns out that these people are actually yokai. They're part of a separate world, and that there is specifics in terms of a feeding ground or a hunting ground within the human world, and there's laws and restrictions that these Yakuza yokai have to kind of stick to so they don't break the accords, which is basically a rule set which is punishable by torture, death, etc, etc. It could be anything really. So there's definitely a thought or a sophisticated approach to creating a rule or infrastructure for the world of Yakuza yokai. These very powerful individuals can't just dominate the human world because they have specific rules, but why they have them to begin with is very curious, obviously. So our main character is kind of baffled. He obviously doesn't really know why these people are transforming or why they're yokai to begin with, but the only thing he's focused on is the fact that he gets to fight people, and he's very excited to fight people. This is the only thing that he thinks about, is fighting someone that is worth his time, that he can have a fun bout with. Does he actually get it within the chapter? Not necessarily, but the opportunity to potentially have some very incredible fights to rival his own strength is within his reach now, which gives him a purpose for once. To work for this young woman who is a Yakuza boss and part of the yokai world, so to speak, and our main character becomes her underling and fights for her, ultimately destroying all of these transforming people that were chasing after her. Quick side note, these transformations are very Yuji Kaku-esque, very Hell's Paradise inspired. It's very beautiful and interesting to see, so I'm excited to see what type of designs and specifics come into play. Hell's Paradise had some very unique cultural and religious elements to it, so now that we have more yokai, demonic, spirits, curses mixed with Yakuza and like late 90s, early 2000s, you have a lot of great elements to pick from and blend them all together, which so far very enjoyable. We end the chapter off with the main character getting into a contract with this young demonic yokai woman, Yakuza boss known as Urara, and with that takes our main character into a brand new world where we learn a little bit about the kind of duels that they have within the Red Lantern district, which might sound super familiar, and it being an official way to actually deal with beef or quabbles or any sort of issues that you have with someone else. I assume it doesn't mean it's always going to be that way, this 1v1 battle, but maybe for more of the formal specific stuff in terms of acquiring position or power or whatever the Yakuza element is within it, maybe even the yokai element, you might have to do a one-to-one duel to acquire whatever you're looking for. Obviously this makes our main character very excited because this is everything that he's been looking for, and with that brings an end to the first chapter. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I am super excited to see where Yuji Kaku goes with Ayashimon. I understand a lot of people have their concerns for it. I'm really hoping that this series can prove a very specific percentage of people wrong, and it will outlive that axing or cancellation, as well as bring hopefully a different perspective of enjoyment for the yokai, curses, spirits, etc, etc. I know it may seem repetitive, but trust me, give it a chance. It has that Chainsaw Man Fire Punch quirk with its very own Yuji Kaku uniqueness. Basically, if you enjoy Fire Punch, if you enjoy Chainsaw Man, if you enjoy Dan to Dan, you will most likely enjoy this story. And I wish all the best for Ayashimon and Yuji Kaku. I'm more than excited to see where everything goes. End time. So with all of that brings us to the end of the video. If you have made it this far, I appreciate you. Thank you very much. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this brand new series. How'd you feel about it? Do you like it? Did you dislike it? You feeling pretty in the middle about it? Do you hope it continues to thrive and become bigger and better than Hell's Paradise? Or maybe you're just hoping it doesn't get axed? Let me know how you feel down below. With that, I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Drink plenty of water, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.